talk about the game plan at the beginning of the game. And then at the end, you break down, okay, here's what we did right, here's what we did wrong, and here's where we need to improve. And that piece of it, businesses miss the most because we're on to the next project. We get something done, we add a new client, we do something, boom, we get them to where they need to be, on to the next.
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales.
Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Well, hello there, friend. Welcome to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Bradley Hartman. On the show, we deliver ideas and insights from leaders across the construction industry every single week to help you lead more effectively. I would like to thank our presenting sponsor, Capital One Trade Credit. What do the fine folks at Capital One Trade Credit do? That's a reasonable question. They help you increase cash flow while increasing revenue while decreasing risk. Yeah, that's right. That's what I said. Revenue up, cash flow up, risk down. You thought it was impossible? It's not. It's not impossible. By yourself? Probably. With Capital One Trade Credit, much more probable. Check out Capital One Trade Credit. I'm excited to bring to you today my conversation with a gentleman who is both inspiring and energetic. Talking to this guy and listening to him, I believe, will instantly upgrade your energy and your motivation. And his name is Gary Geiman. It is spelled Geiman, but it's not Geiman. It's Geiman. So Gary Geiman. He's a proud graduate of Northern Kentucky University. Mascot is, oh yeah, this is a good one. This is one of the best mascots from any university in the continental United States. It is the Northern Kentucky University Norse. Yeah, that's right. Norse, not the Norse, just Norse. And you're like, I remember from grade school, I learned something about the Norsemen. Yeah, that's right. They're Vikings. But look at this. Look at the differentiation of Northern Kentucky University just going with Norse. The NKU Norse rolls right off the tongue there. Anyway, much like the Norse of Northern Kentucky University, Mr. Gary Geiman, he's one of a kind. He began his career in the mortgage business and after 4 years said, I'm pretty sure I can do this on my own, and launched his own business that he ran for 8 years. He now runs DMN8 Partners, Inc. Now, it is the letters, all capitalized, DMN and the number 8 for dominate. So if you're to look at it and you're thinking, what's the damn 8? No, it's dominate. Have a little creativity. Think yourself through this, okay? And I believe listening to this episode will help you dominate in at least one small way. In this episode, Gary talks about teaching standards of behavior consistently around the topic of how to be successful here. He talks about the importance of really defining the mission and after activity reports, which is something I had not thought much about. He shares some insight on how to make speed your currency and to get people to pay for it. And that's so important in our construction industry. We talk about all of that and so much more. You will enjoy this conversation, I promise you, with Gary Geiman, owner of DMN8 Partners, Inc. As always, thank you for listening. Mr. Gary Geiman, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience and spend some time with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think if you can deliver half the value you brought me on kind of our pre-call, I think we'll be good to go. So I want to start off with something that I think, honestly, we and my team, we need to do a better job of as we are hiring new people and bringing them in. And I see people and many of our clients and friends in the industry are struggling with this as well, which is how do you bring new people on and make it really explicit what they need to do to be successful? Because the way you described it had me just nodding my head saying, yes, we need more of that. Maybe tell us about your process and how you do that.
Yeah. So first, I mean, even before the bringing on process, we try to get as in-depth as possible in the interview process. But number one, I'll be really upfront. I'm not a person that likes long interviews. And most of the way I do business is the way I want to be treated. And I hate it doing an interview and waiting 30 days to hear if you're going to hire me or not. And that's just not how I work. So we do the same thing with people that we bring on, but we get very intent. And I really focus on questions that we can ask people where, for lack of a better word, and this is how I talk to my leadership team, like we want to ask questions where they can't lie. Not that people are liars, but everybody likes to embellish. Sure. You know, and like if I hire a salesperson, I don't really care what he did at his last sales job. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for someone that can create conversations. I'm looking for someone that knows how to interact and is very easy to get along with. And because a good salesperson to me just has the ability to have a conversation and has the ability to get the other person to really communicate and take notice. And if you can get the other person to talk in a sales relationship like that, then you're going to win the game, if you will. So we ask questions around that. For instance, I give you a couple of examples. Please. One of my favorite questions to ask in an interview is what's your superpower? And with that question, what I'm looking for is like are they trying to snow me, or do they really want to talk about their superpower? Like I'm a big Batman geek, and for a couple of reasons. One, the Dark Knight series was phenomenal. I love the backstory of everything, and like getting into the backstory like really drew me in. And so that series just made me more of a Batman guy. And he's not really a superhero. He's a crime fighter. So any person can be Batman. And I'll always say I'm Batman. And the reason why you know that I'm Batman is because you've never seen me and Batman in the same room. Of course, everybody in the world can say that, but that's the conversation I have. But the whole ideal of that question is communicate with me, talk to me, tell me something about yourself. Don't try to tell me, oh, I'm really good at working, I'm a hard worker, like all of that crap. So It's not that question is going to preclude someone, but it's a question to get them to talk. And we go through a series of questions like that. We use some video interview software. We have 3 people on the team that usually talk to people, and it's all about communication. So we bring them on. We're like, okay, we made the right decision to bring them on, because when we hire someone, just like any other business, it's your responsibility to make sure they're successful. Right. And I have tons of friends of mine that are in business, our business owners are in a position to hire, and they forget that piece of it. Like they'll say, well, we bring somebody on and we want them to be successful, but they have to be successful. Okay. But it's your job to get them to the ramp. It's your job to make them be successful. And if you equate back to sports, which is easy for me, I coached basketball for many, many years. We plug people into spots based upon their ability, but we also have to teach them beyond their ability. One of the biggest problems when kids come into high school and they're starting to play basketball, for instance, they're taught to play a lot of zone, and a lot of coaches like to play man. So you have to take the zone principles they learn and teach them how to play man. And it's our responsibility during practice to make sure that they can be effective and execute. And so what can you bring to your organization to help your people become effective and execute? So we base everything off of a couple of things. One is our mission statement. So what mission are you on, and is everybody on the same mission? It can't be ambiguous. It has to be direct, and it has to be specific. If you know anybody that served in the armed forces, I didn't, but I have friends that did, and I pick their brains about this all the time, because to me, it's the greatest organization that produces leaders of any other organization that's ever existed is the United States military. And I have friends specifically that were Marines that were in sergeant capacities at different levels. And so I hammer away at them all the time, and they're always scratching their head like, you're a business owner. Why do you care? Well, I care about leadership. And obviously the U.S. military does something right because they produce effective people over and over and over again. So mission has to be specific, has to be direct. Everybody has to be on the same page. So what is that mission? For instance, in our business, our mission is to help businesses achieve their level of success over and over and over again related to sales and marketing. So we have to find out what's their level of success, and then we have to find out how and who their customer is to help them do that. Those two things, what's their level of success, what's their success look like, is a question we ask every customer, and everybody is on the same page knowing what that is. Mm-hmm. And then what does their customer look like? Who is their perfect customer? So we help them identify that, so then we can go to work on our mission. And then we treat every situation, relationship, customer with the same core values. Our core values, I keep limited because I want everyone to be on the same page. I don't have things in our core values like integrity, honesty, quality, because that's a given. If you're doing business and you have to remind people to have integrity or be honest, there may be some problems.
Got a different issue.
So, so my core values are very, very specific to what we do. We make digital easy. So we're in digital marketing. That's our primary business. And we make digital marketing easy for the companies that work with us. We don't ask them to build or do things that is beyond their scope. We don't ask them to go write a bunch of copy if that's not something they have available. Like, we want to get them to market quick. So we're going to make it easy. We respond same day. Somebody emails or calls us. Our job is to make sure we respond to that message. And in fact, internally, same day means an hour. I want a response via email if somebody emails us, or I want a return phone call to at least acknowledge the communication. Nothing worse than not communicating or miscommunicating. So we want to make sure we're communicating.
Right.
We solve problems. A problem arises. We don't try to place blame or find blame. The goal is to fix the problem. Then we'll go back and figure out where we fell short or where something fell short so we can fix the problem. But we solve problems. And then finally, one of my most important core values, what my company is built on, is production over perfection. And we talked a little bit about this before, about our currency, what the value of our company is to customers is speed to market. That all plays in to how to help create successful people. Then on top of that, we build SOPs out to where all of our SOPs are video and written. And in fact, we're going through some right now to improve. There's something we can talk about, with that later, but we're going through SOPs right now to improve, to make ourselves more efficient, because people have went through these SOPs and said, you know what, this is great. This helps, but I can make it quicker, or I can make it better, or I can make it more efficient. And so consistently communicating what their role is, providing support, making sure they understand how we operate with mission statement, core values, and then providing them those procedures where they can step right into a role. I had one of my account managers say this, and it was very telling. We were talking about making sure that our people are successful. And he said, and it's very simple, but he's right. It's like, go to McDonald's, the guy who was making burgers at 8 a.m., the dude that comes in at 8 p.m. makes the burgers the same exact way. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly right. But we also want to make sure that when we make those burgers, we make them as effective as possible, efficient as possible, and quickly as possible. That's really our focus. And then consistency in our message helps us to maintain giving somebody a ramp to success.
That's great. I'm going to bridge two different elements of kind of what you shared there to get your perspective on something. So you probably heard of something called the Eisenhower Matrix, which was, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but the story I read that I'm going to pretend is true is, he was leading the Allied invasion of World War II, so many constraints, fighting back Nazi Germany, long supply chains getting back to the United States. And he had a lot of things that were urgent and had a lot of things that were important. So just kind of a 2x2 grid, urgent, not urgent, important, not important. And trying to understand that sometimes something that's really urgent is not that important, and vice versa. Question for you is, as you think about speed being your currency, I think a lot of folks who are listening would say, totally get it. Speed of response, speed of resolution is important. How do you teach your folks that you can do something really, really fast that is really, really urgent and really ignore something that is important? How do you teach that balance, or can you?
That's something we struggle with for sure. We talk internally probably about this. I don't want to say daily, but it's pretty close to daily. Prioritization, right, and understanding that level of priority. And we try to prioritize based upon, if it's a customer situation, we're trying to prioritize one customer over another. Okay. We typically look at what's the quickest way to cash for that customer? Because in marketing, obviously, them making money is what's important. So
Right.
what's the quickest way to cash for that customer, and who can we impact quicker? Sometimes it's just a matter of us not utilizing our resources effectively where we run into that. And sometimes it's just maybe an individual getting a little paralysis analysis because they're trying to think about it too much, or analysis paralysis, saying it backwards, but they just overthink it, right? So typically looking at it from that perspective, and I think even, taking it a step further, like the Eisenhower Matrix was like, don't do, delegate, don't delegate kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that, goes back to urgent, important, not important.
Right.
What are the things that we have to do right now? Like, for instance, if we have a customer with a website down, that's pretty urgent and pretty important, right? If we have a customer that wants to change some stuff on the website, that is neither urgent nor important, right? But we still have to maintain our values of response. We have to respond, we have to communicate and do those things so that we're not telling the customer, hey, this isn't as important as someone else. They're still, our customers are still important. But what is it internally that we have to put in flow? And honestly, as a leader, I sometimes fail in communicating the prioritization correctly because I have to pull back the reins and go, okay, this person is working diligently on this task. And yeah, it's urgent, but like you said, it's not important. So we have to kind of, let's stop this for a second, go fix this and come back. And the goal is, and I go back to consistency, like maintaining consistency in your message, maintaining consistency in your process. As long as you continue to maintain that consistency, when you have to make changes or improve, they get it. Oh, okay. So we're doing that because we're trying to improve our speed and we're trying to improve our efficiency and we're trying to understand prioritization better because that's what Gary talks about all the time. And if we talk about that all the time, those are the things, that they'll think about. We were having a leadership meeting earlier today, and we had this same conversation almost. And I went back to a basketball thing that I used to say all the time. Like every huddle that we had, we talk about defense and we talk about, okay, what are the 3 things we got to do on defense? And this was right before we break. And it got to the point with most teams that whoever the captain was or who the leaders were would do it. Like our 3 things were be halfway between the wall. If the ball swings sides, you got to talk and move. And if anybody comes into the paint, we put them on the floor. It was a little bit more aggressive than that, but that's what we said. And every team that I ever had, like we focus on those things on defense. Now we might have called a timeout to set up a play on offense, but at the end of the day, it was like, okay, now we got to remember what we do to defend. Well, same thing with your team. Like what's the core values? Always be focused on that. And then what is your value to your customers? Focus on pushing that. And anybody that's been in sales knows we like to think about the features and the benefits and we like to sell that. But really the customer always listens to that radio station. What's in it for me? And we have to position ourselves that way. But you also have to keep your staff and your team positioned to fulfill that. And as monotonous as it is and as simple as it sounds, it comes down to consistency, in my opinion.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question about something you just referred to. Is you just said, one of my leadership failures was ... And when I heard you say that, until it is vocalized, I'm not sure I realized how few leaders say that. Question to you, maybe in 2 parts here, is number 1, how often do you say that to your team? And how often do you think about the risk between, number 1, being vulnerable and being open and letting people know, listen, man, no one's perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm trying to get better. And 2, if you hear your leader, your owner too many times say, I failed at this, I failed at that, you might be like, maybe I'm following the wrong guy. How much do you think about that?
I'm pretty confident. I'm a pretty confident individual. I wasn't always this way, sense. For sure. But now, probably the last 15 years, I've had a pretty strong dynamic of I'm confident in my abilities. And I know what I'm good at, and I know what I'm not good at. And the things that I'm not good at, I push to other people with direction to get it done. And, you mentioned one piece of it, like how focused are you on telling your team too much that you failed, right? To me, that's an ego thing. And if you get caught up in your ego, then you have a problem leading anyway. And I know that I fail at a lot of stuff. I know what my strengths are, And I definitely know what my weaknesses are. There is no, and I'm not one of those guys where I go try to read a book to become stronger at my weaknesses. No, I read books to get stronger at my strengths. I find people to fill in for the weaknesses so that they can help me be stronger in those areas. And I am a strong believer, both personally and professionally, in taking responsibility, ultimate responsibility, and apologizing. If you're not apologetic for the mistakes you make, then you're going to lose people that want to follow you anyway. No one wants to follow someone that isn't willing to say, you know what, I messed up there. That's my fault. And I think the more confident you are in what your abilities are, the easier it is to do that. And you'll find yourself deferring to the people on your team in terms of allowing them to maybe run that piece of it so you don't have to keep saying, I failed that. Now, I've had times to where, I disagreed with people or people on my team, and I said, we're doing this. We're going to do it. And I bought it totally. I was like, I'm taking it. Let's go. And I failed and had to go back and, hey, I shouldn't have done a few things. One, I shouldn't have taken it out of someone's hands. And two, I shouldn't have got really focused on this instead of thinking about what it is we need to do. So in my opinion, and it's just my opinion and it's free, so you take it how it is, the ability to be able to communicate when you fail is just as important as when you're successful. The vulnerability is what makes people want to be around you. At least in my perspective or in my experience, that's the case. So there was definitely a time when I was afraid of it, for sure. I know when that time was. I was definitely afraid of it. I have no fear of it anymore. And I focus on putting people in place so that I don't have to fail. Like we be as successful as we can. But it happens, yeah.
Yeah, no. And my immediate thought was it's refreshing to hear someone say, man, I failed at this, and that's okay. And we could talk about that. And this could be a whole different podcast, Gary, but the importance of leaders, not only leaders, but I would say leaders modeling the behavior of apologizing to people, either they let down or maybe they hurt their feelings or just saying, hey, I'm sorry, right? That can be so powerful. And I know as someone who my wife and colleague, she's our CFO, she would readily attest to, for a long time, I really struggled apologizing at all, almost like a badge of honor that I'm a guy who doesn't apologize. And then after a while, you get old enough and you realize, only a-holes wear that badge as some sort of, anything indicating honor, and the importance of apologizing, how quickly you can reset and refocus and reorganize a team in a different direction is so powerful. But let me ask you this.
As long as it's meaningful, I'll say that. As long as it's meaningful. Like if it's just I'm sorry, but don't take accountability, definitely. Yeah. But I mean, the one thing too is being able to have self-awareness that you fail at something. A lot of people don't want to be self-aware, or they aren't self-aware. Like one of those two things. And if you don't have awareness, like how can you have vision? That's the way I look at it. There has to be the ability to be aware, to have vision.
Yeah. The line I hear often in sports is I apologize if I offended anybody. I'm like, that's not an apology. That's basically saying you're sorry if you have an issue with this. And I was like, if you're going to make an apology, dude, own it. But I want to ask you about coaching. Are there principles from coaching in sports that you've said, I either learned the hard way or a mentor taught me about coaching people in athletic fields or courts, et cetera, that I apply in business that I know work extremely well? And you just referred to one of them, I believe, which is hire for strength. And, if you're a really good shooter and you're really good on defense, but you're not a good rebounder, figure out how to get Dennis Rodman. Like, how do you do that and build a team that way? That one came right about of hiring for strength and then filling in slots where you're weak. Are there other principles that come to mind for you that you're like, hey, business and sports, same exact principle from a coaching perspective for you as a leader?
Yeah, well, number one is communication. We we have different ways to communicate plays or sets, either hand signals or just gestures, whatever it may be. But it goes back to, well, being consistent in your communication. So communicating the same way, but also making sure they understand what the communication is. I had one kid that played for me, solid athlete. In fact, he didn't play college basketball, but he played college baseball.
Okay.
And he's just a solid athlete. You could tell him, hey, go get a bucket. He'd go get a bucket. Hey, shut this guy down. He'd shut this guy down. But if we ran a set for him or a play for him, 4 kids on the floor would know the play and he wouldn't. So you'd have, hey, go here, go do that. And he'd have to remember, oh, yeah, I'm supposed to go there.
Yeah.
But he was a great athlete. And so always was like, when we would put plays or sets in, how are we going to communicate this to him so he'll remember? What's the ways that he's going to remember? And would get the whole team involved to say, hey, we're going to help him be successful. And I think there's a little bit of that you can bring to your company and your staff in that, okay, when someone doesn't always remember the exact process, like we're not here to beat them down. We're not here to kick them off the team. We're here, hey, don't forget to do this. Don't forget to do that. If you need assistance with that, just let me know. Having people that are there to support the entire team is really important. And when you build that team methodology with your communication, that should stick through. And the other thing that was really important for me to learn, and I coached in between 2 entrepreneurial sessions, I guess, for myself. I had about a 12-year period where I owned a business, and then I had about 6 years where I didn't. I coached during that.
Okay.
I worked for another company, and then I was a paraprofessional at a high school coaching. And then after coaching, then I started my second entrepreneurial path, basically. And that break in between taught me the communication, the consistent communication with your team. And I think helped me become a better leader in seeing people's strengths and weaknesses for sure, and how to build off of them. And then planning was huge. In basketball, you call it scouting. You go and you scout the other team, you figure out what their strengths and weaknesses are, and then you figure out how to use your team to offset those strengths and weaknesses and find mismatches to be able to win the game.
Mm-hmm.
And that planning piece was always critical. It was always critical. And it was unfortunate because I was on 2 different staffs, and I was on one staff where there were people that were really good at scouting, and I learned a lot from them. And I was on another staff where it was like Mr. Magoo went to scout. And you start playing a game, it's like, this is nothing like we expected. You're pressing, and they can pass over top, and they're getting layups. So you're like, okay. Or you're playing 2-3 zone, and they got 3 guys just wide open shooting 3. It's like, something's not right here. So you understood the idea of having a plan going into whatever it is you were doing. And in fact, the company that I worked for at that time was really big on preparation and planning as well. I mean, to the off the chain good. Like, we would have preps for a prep for a prep. Like, you're prepping for this client, you'd have 2 meetings before that.
Yeah.
So you'd really prep for the client, and it was a little over the top, but at the same time, it taught you the importance of understanding your communication, understanding your delivery, and then understanding how to take time, make it efficient, and be successful with it. And, I think if you can pull your team in to a place to be able to be prepared for the plan and be able then to execute that plan, then most of the issues that come along, you should be able to kind of find those out before you actually start working that plan or that project. And being focused on that was really, really key. I think the other piece of it is, which is also a military thing, but it's also a team, is that after activity report. So like you had this briefing to start, or you talked about the game plan at the beginning of the game, and then at the end you break down, okay, here's what we did right, here's what we did wrong, and here's where we need to improve. And that piece of it, businesses miss the most, because we're on to the next project. We get something done, we had a new client, we do something, boom, we get them to where they need to be, on to the next. We don't talk about, man, we probably should focus on this piece right here, because if we improve just a little bit, we can make more money, we could be more efficient, like whatever that piece is. And being able to self-diagnose and understand what you did really well, what you didn't do really well, where to make changes. That's key. We had somebody today, a process that we've been using. I'm going to go like 9 months pretty consistently. She said, I keep having to make these changes here and here.
Mm-hmm.
And what I did was I just made the changes to our process so I don't have to go back and make the changes. And it saves 15 minutes. I'm like, that's awesome. But it took her having a conversation with us to say, hey, where can we improve? And she's like, oh, we improve here and here. And we just save 15 minutes on a process that takes us about 10 hours. So I saved, a big chunk of time to me on just flipping two things in our process. And that's where, if you have those after activity reports or those sessions afterwards to review, you can come up with information. And I didn't come up with it. She did. That's the whole idea. Like the people that are in the trenches doing the work, coming back to you and saying, hey, this is what we could do right here. And it fixes this problem.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of folks will say, or will think these two ideas are mutually exclusive, which is speed of response, speed of action, right? And you're saying you got to plan adequately up front. If you do that, you can go really fast when you're in the game. But afterwards, slowing down a little bit to say, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? What can we learn? And I just have seen consistently, if you don't do that immediately, if that's not part of the process. We played the game. Let's review the film. This idea of like this narrative fallacy, which is the further we get from what really happened in our minds, are like, yeah, that didn't go really well, but we knew this and this and that. And all of a sudden we start naturally as human beings start explaining away some things where this was an unknown. You couldn't forecast this. Gary said this and I didn't understand that. It's nobody's fault, as opposed to saying, let's take a step back. What did we do great? What did we do okay? And how can we improve? I think that's that idea of this after activity report, so underutilized, and I'm guilty of it as well.
Yeah. And you know what? The pain is that if you do it right after, you know the pain, the grit, everything that went into it, the emotion that went into it is still fresh.
Yeah.
You wait a couple days, weeks, whatever. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't that painful. We could do that again. But if you do it immediately and you relive that, and it's not always bad stuff either. It's, hey, we did this really, really well. How do we do that again? Because we need to be at that level all the time, not an average level, but a really great level. And what can we do to make sure that happens? And I think both of those pieces are equally important, not just focusing on the bad and the improvement, but like, man, we knocked that out of the park. Let's make sure we do that again.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to make a little transition here. I'm watching the time and appreciate you being so generous with it. Is as we think about your expertise at Dominate Partners, this is something that I was lying down on the virtual therapy couch in our first session. I won't do that as intentional this time, but a little bit. Can you tell me what are the top 1 or 2 mistakes companies make that you see when they're trying to grow their customers, grow revenue, grow profits, leveraging Facebook, Google, email, any sort of automation? What are a couple of the mistakes that you see over and over again that you'd say, listen, if I'm going to give you some free advice here in the next, 2 minutes or so, these are the top 2 things that this is where we'd start, and you can maybe even begin to self-diagnose.
This is going to hurt.
I'm bracing myself
because this is what everybody does. They don't give it enough time. Okay. They want something to work quickly.
Yep. And
unfortunately, marketing is about testing and improving. People that are good at marketing test, improve. I'm not talking about marketing companies. I'm talking about companies that do marketing.
Yeah, right.
They test and improve, because you can't expect to run a Facebook ad, run a Google ad, send out one email, whatever it may be, and hit a grand slam. If you do, awesome, but it's not repeatable.
Yeah.
It's not repeatable. So you have to come up with repeatable processes. So you're constantly testing. You're testing copy. You're testing placement. You're testing the offer. You're testing the landing page. You're testing the calls to action. Like all of that stuff has to be looked at and tested. So giving up too soon is one. And two, which is the really painful piece, is especially with ads, is not spending enough money on the test. for instance, I know people like I'm running this Facebook ad at $5 or $10 a day, and I've ran it for 7 days, and I've gotten nothing. You've spent $70 trying to prove a process, and you've decided that Facebook doesn't work, when we can go online and pull up thousands of companies that Facebook ads do work. And the reason why they work is because they test and they apply budget to that test. So if you're a small company, let's say a couple 100,000, you're not in the million revenue rank yet.
Yep.
And you want to grow and you want to scale, and you I run Facebook ads, I want to run Google, I want to do this. My suggestion would be pick one platform, and that way you can invest into, and when I'm talking about an ad platform,
yep,
and invest into that ad platform with time and money, but then use the other platforms organically and push as much content out as possible. When I built this business and actually a previous business, Facebook was the way that I built it, and I didn't run ads. Like, I was organic with content, pushing out value, going live consistently, constantly. If you go to my Facebook stuff now, I'm not as consistent, but we're a lot bigger, and I'm past that trying to be something stage. Like, we're at a point to where now we're managing it. So number one, I don't have time to be on Facebook all the time. And two, my content I push out on multiple platforms. So I'm not just focused on one thing. But the biggest mistakes related to paid and organic, no consistency, they don't test, and they're not spending enough if it is paid, not spending enough to figure out what works and what doesn't work.
So let me just ask you, answer needs to be a dollar value. I'm going to give you a quick scenario here. Say we got a company, they're doing $9.5 million in revenue, net profitability, 8.5%. Maybe they got a budget for kind of marketing, a couple $100,000 for the year. And they say, hey, we're not doing any of this. Gary, is there a dollar value of threshold where if you say, sounds like 7 days, $10 a day on Facebook, not enough? If you say, hey, this is kind of the threshold where you're going to have to at least put out, say, this much money to test, improve, kind of go back and forth through a few iterations, say over 6 months. I know there's a ton of variables in there. I'm probably speaking down and kind of making your job even harder, but what might be a number where you say, for those constraints, you should be thinking around this much money just to see if it's viable?
I mean, I would be in the range somewhere between $50 to $100 a day, depending upon the value of what is you're selling and the sales process, like what the length of that sales process is. Would probably be 50 to 100. And I mean, if we're being honest, I'd say $100 a day. And that should give you, the ability to be able to figure out, is it quote unquote working or not within about 30 days.
Okay.
And then there's ways that you can improve that, obviously, but $100 a day is going to give you enough money daily to still get some leads. You're still going to get activity there, but also figure out if it's scalable, and if it is scalable, how best to scale that. If that was your focus, then I would do that. Okay. However, if you're doing $9.5 million a year, Facebook isn't where I would send you. It would depend on where you're at, like what kind of industry you're in.
Sure.
But there's some automated type things with around data and marketing around that we would probably want to focus on first, and then use Facebook as a retargeting mechanism. But that's where I would be.
That's helpful. Yeah. Well, hey, man, this has been great. I've really enjoyed talking to you. And as we did on our pre-call, once we just kind of fell into management and leadership and coaching and communication, all of a sudden that led to a much larger conversation that I think was extremely valuable. I really believe it's going to be valuable for our audience. However, I can just tell from this whole thing, my wheels are turning, because we're in the stage where we need experts. By the way, I have way too many clients or friends of smaller companies that continue to say, yeah, well, we're going to start Instagram or Facebook or some data automation. We got to hire someone right out of school. These kids know this. And I said, these kids don't know this. Yeah, the kids might know how to use these platforms. They're not experts. Right. So I think we should go to an expert like you. I want you to remove any sort of humility. I want you to be as candid as possible. Where can people learn more about you, Dominate Partners, and if they want to get a hold of you and to learn more, maybe from your content, where can they do that?
Our website is salvonow.com. It's SALVONOW.com. Salvo is a French and German term, military term that means shoot all your guns at once. That's why I chose that. You can also get us through DMN8partners.com. It'll redirect to that.
Okay.
My active platform is Facebook, my personal profile. So facebook.com/Gary Geiman. I would tell you this related to what you just said. Definitely there's value in young people being involved in the marketing channel. They bring different strategies and they bring a different mindset. And I have, I'm by far the oldest person. I think my director of ops is a little bit older than I am, but we're the oldest people. I'm 50s and his mid 50s. Most of our people are early 30s or younger. They don't have the ability to have vision or understand planning for the most part. They understand the technology and they understand how that works, but they can't fit everything together. So that's where, we come in with the expertise, because there's some things I don't know related to what we do, let's be honest. But what I do understand is how to acquire customers and how to turn that into money, conversion. And we put those things into place. So you're not wrong. Halfway, like young people are going to be great. They're going to be innovative, sure. But keep in mind, like understanding the acquisition piece and converting someone.
Yeah.
That's where they don't have the experience or the ability. So digital marketing is kind of where we sit, but we utilize a lot of things that aren't digital as well in terms of platforms. Like we have access to data. I like using data a lot. So for instance, let's say you're in the home service world and you're in an HVAC company. We can go into your market and know who hasn't pulled an HVAC permit on a home within the last 10 years. Why is that important? Well, they probably are getting close to the market needing that. We can do the same thing with roofing and plumbing. Okay. So that's just one thing we can do. And then we can put a lot of automation behind it with direct mail, Facebook, SMS, dialing. So there's multiple ways to do it. And unfortunately, people get stuck, and you know this, like they get stuck usually on one thing. Like this really, it's either sexy or they like it.
Yep.
When really you want to be able to be hyper-focused on trying to get that customer wherever they are. So that's typically where we're at. I always say these podcast episodes that I do, they always end up, because my passion is leadership and development and sales. But I own a marketing company. So we don't talk anything about marketing until the end. We only talk about the leadership stuff. But honestly, if your company isn't solid and have foundation, it don't matter how many leads you're creating, you're not going to be able to grow. So hopefully we have brought some value to you. And if you'd like to reach out, that's how you catch me. And I'd love to have conversations with anybody who's interested in talking further. So
got it. We'll make sure we connect with you, salvonow.com, and then Gary Geiman, Geiman. We'll make sure we plug all that stuff in the show notes. Gary, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
All right then, friends, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed my conversation with Mr. Gary Geiman of Dominate Partners. I learned an awful lot from Gary, and I'm going to have him back on the show sometime in the future because there's a lot of things that we did not cover that I'm sure he'd be very insightful about. And these are needs that I have within my own business. If you did, in fact, get value from this episode with Mr. Gary Geiman, please, I want you to do two things. Number one, share it with your network. Whether you're sharing it directly from the podcast player you use or email or text, the people in your life, they look to leaders like you to determine where they're going to put their limited time and attention. So if you got value from this, we would love it if you shared it with them. One more thing, it's a little bit more intrusive, asking for a little bit more of your time. The reviews that we get on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, whatever podcast player you are using, those mean more to us than you know. If you get a second, probably about 20, maybe 25 seconds in and out, and wouldn't mind leaving us a review, those mean more to us than you know. And we strive to make this the best podcast you listen to, and we love listening to our listeners. Yeah, that sounded right. So feel free to email me directly at bradley@bradleyhartmanandco.com. Again, Bradley@bradleyhartman with 2 N's and co.com. Let us know how we can make it better. Topics, guests, things to dive into. If you want us to do an asking for a friend on a specific topic you are challenged with, that's what we're here for. We want to do this. We want to make this more useful to you. And last but not least, if you get value from this podcast, I think you would absolutely get value from our twice monthly newsletter. If you go to bradleyhartmanandco.com and click on blog or scroll to the bottom of literally every single page on the site, you can subscribe to our newsletter. We take a ton of care, and I love writing. It's my passion to really find useful, insightful things and to share these more broadly. And if you're into that sort of thing, you can sign up. And if you determine that I ever failed to deliver on my promise to you, you can unsubscribe with one click. But we've excited to see that newsletter really blow up over the last 30 days or so as we switched brands and brought everyone kind of into the same little party here. So again, that's our construction leadership newsletter. Go to bradleyhartmanandco.com, scroll to the bottom of any page or the blog, and you can sign up real easily. If you do that, we're going to give you a special bonus. We have some tools that we make especially for our subscribers to our newsletter. They are not available to anyone else. If you sign up for that, we will give you the password to go in there and download more than a dozen tools that we've used and developed for our clients. So, all right, I'm going to quit talking. You got work to do today. I want to thank our sponsors at Capital One Trade Credit. If you're interested in increasing revenue and cash flow while decreasing risk by using a state-of-the-art digital platform to make it easier for your customers to buy from you, if that sounds of interest, you, my friend, will be interested in Capital One Trade Credit. Thanks for listening. We're going to close out like we always do with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great day.